Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? Yeah, we're here. It's time. Giddy up. It's your boy, Jon the Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Coming at you on, well, a pretty big week here in Knicks land. We'll get into things and events and whatnot in a bit. First, let me throw it to my better podcasting half, Jeremy Cohen. Hello, sir.
Hey, John. Happy Father's Day to you. We're recording on Saturday. Happy Father's Day to my own father, who I love very much, and to everyone out there who is a father, who has a father they're celebrating with, or who is missing their father for whatever reason or whatnot. Really awesome day. So great day for dads.
It is a good day for. I'm happy to be a dad. I'm happy to be a dad. I know. Like dad gets bad, like dad jokes, dad movies. I love all that shit. Very, very here for it. I have no complaints. I have no complaints. You almost hit yourself in the face with your microphone.
Yeah, just trying to work on volume, but that's all right.
This is
nevertheless,
like, as a dad, I'm like, I could identify that you are hitting yourself in the face with your microphone. That's why I'm here to give guidance.
Just missed, but yes.
So like you said, we're recording this on Saturday night. There was when we last talked, there was a possibility that there was going to be a basketball game tomorrow on Sunday night. There is not going to be a basketball game on Sunday night because the season has ended. I said my piece on it, but I'm trying to think. See, this is how you know you are in front of a microphone too often. I can't remember. Did I say something on this pod or on Patreon? Either way,
Patreon.
It might have been Patreon. So let's both say something about the Warriors winning. I'll throw it to you first. What do you think?
Thank God. Listen, I just can't do Boston sports. I can't do it. I can't root for Boston in any capacity. So it was really nice to not have to worry about the stress of, are the Celtics going to win in Game 7? Are the Warriors going to blow it? They didn't. They closed it out in great fashion. Really happy that it happened. It was still, but here's the thing. It was a great season for Boston. And I know that I don't have to give them a compliment, but on the next episode of Cream, there's something that they did that is really just impressive. I'll save it until then, but organizationally, they're a great model, and their time is now. They've got a pristine 3-year window. It's just about other teams loading up or getting better, and we'll see what happens next year.
Well said. I will just say briefly, as the dad of the two of us, dads like to have things neat and orderly. We don't like confusion. We don't like, when the proper world order is thrown into a mess. And to that end, it made me feel warm and comforted inside that the generational superstar won the championship. There is something about the very old NBA fan of me whether it's Jordan or it's Shaq or it's Duncan or it's LeBron or it's Steph, and he belongs in that. We're not going to do the Steph ranking conversation. It's been done to death. But he is in that group. And the fact that he's the one holding the trophy, I'm like, okay. At the same time, it's a little discouraging because it's really hard to get those guys, and the Knicks don't currently have one. And that's why I'm looking forward to Cream, because I'm sure you'll touch on how the Celtics really did a very nice job of team building. And I don't want to say that they didn't miss any steps. Every team screws up something along the way. But they really did it, as well as you could reasonably expect a team to do it. And it wasn't enough. And, again, we're not going to get into the reasons why that is, but part of it is they ran into Steph, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
So that's enough of that. And now we move on to the 2022-23 NBA season, because there is no rest for the weary. I guess, how do you want to open with Mr. Wood, Christian Wood?
Yeah, might as well. Sounds like a good place to start.
We should say that there were two transactions that actually, no, before we get to it, really quickly, what did you think of the Nuggets Thunder deal? So for anybody who doesn't know, the in a report that I had to reread a couple times to make sure I wasn't misunderstood. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, right? Okay. So the Nuggets offloaded the expiring contract of JaMychal Green's $8 million. He had a player option, which obviously he's opting into. And they are getting the 30th pick as they unload a contract that ostensibly they wanted to move off of for money reasons. And we don't have to go too deep into that if you don't want to. And they are getting, they're also getting, I think, a couple of seconds, and they're giving a future first round pick that is protected. I have not seen the protections reported. Have you? I haven't looked that closely. I don't think it's out there. So I would assume it's not like top 4. I would assume it's like top 10 lottery, something. I would be surprised if the Nuggets organizationally gave away something that had a chance to be very good. But yeah, I don't know. Does this say something about the value of late first round picks in this draft? Does this say something about the Thunder were like, man, nobody wants our cap space before July 1st? As a reminder to everybody, also, the Thunder were the last team that had cap space in this league year. So use it or lose it. What did you take from that trade? Good trade for the Thunder because they have to spend the money anyway. They're below the salary. They're well below the salary cap. They're below the cap floor. So it's money that would be going towards players anyway. Might as well take an asset and push it out because the Thunder have too many picks. Yes. They need to consolidate in some way, which is why we're also seeing conversations of the idea of them moving from 12 to 7. Maybe they include 34 in there as well because they already have 2. So that's the beauty of having so many picks. It's great until you then have too many. And you could say you never have too many picks. That's an argument that could be made because you could draft in stashes. But then there could be moments where maybe you do have too many picks. You have too many roster spots. You have to figure something out. So it was smart on their end. And for Denver, it was a tax maneuvering. They get out of deeper tax hell than they need to. I think the bigger thing was they probably shouldn't have extended JaMychal Green, but they do get a traded player exception out of it, which is something that could be important if they want to turn JaMychal Green into something better. As long as they're not hard capped, I don't see why they would be, then they should be fine. So it was a good trade for both teams. I like it better for the Thunder, but it was still good for Denver as well. Yeah, I guess it's strange because traditionally when we think of like you pay a first to unload money, and like here the the Nuggets are paying a first. They're paying a distant first, but they also pick up a first in the process, which is kind of like, it's nice for them that now they get 30 and I think they have 21 also. Yep. I thought about how this might relate to the Knicks. I don't know that it really does, other than maybe like if you were thinking the Knicks might want to trade down and pick up like a first in like the middle of the first round and then a pick in the late first round. It seems like the value of the late first round picks in this particular draft, especially that's a good transition to the Christian Wood trade. So the Dallas Mavericks also traded away a late first round pick along with a bunch of salary for a bunch of guys that don't matter, expiring contracts. And they get a pretty good player out of it. I think this is a nice little trade for the Dallas Mavericks. And I don't know any other way to put it other than that, unless I am missing something. Am I missing something, Jeremy Cohen? Well, this is essentially Christian Wood for the 26th pick, which is, that's interesting value. That's a good Wood's a good offensive player. He is. The question, of course, is can he mentally be the player that the Mavericks need him to be? Because he's gone from stop to stop, and there have been questions about attitude. And, there's somebody who said, well, he maybe wants to win. He's on losing teams all the time. I hear that, but also there are plenty of players who are on losing teams that don't act in a way that he has acted. To me, it's just to be disciplined by your head coach last season when there are players who are 6-7 years younger than you are, and they're acting like professionals. It's just, it's a little confounding. There's a reason why. This is the thing. I saw a lot of folks being like, oh my God, this is a steal for Dallas. Well, why do you think his value was the 26th pick overall? Because someone that is that good offensively, there are some warts there. And especially on the defensive side, there's an entire thread on Twitter, which is hilarious, of Christian Wood
defensive mishaps where it's just guys blowing by him.
He didn't care.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't care.
Can he care enough to be worth it? Like, it's, again, I like the deal for both teams. It makes a lot of sense for why the Rockets would want to do that and why the Mavs would too. The question I have is then, and this can maybe be another segue, the Mavs are bringing in a center who is good offensively, who's not going to hold down the paint in any way, really, but more importantly, perhaps, is a higher usage player. And there's so many mouths to feed on Dallas. How does that impact other players? And how might that impact someone like Jalen Brunson?
So just in regards to Christian Wood, I do think, because there were certainly Knicks fans who were like, we couldn't come up with something better than the 26 pick and like salary flotsam to get a guy who, might help our team. I think everything, and for anybody who doesn't know, there was a specific incident where Wood basically refused to check back into a game at halftime. I think he wasn't, there was maybe his teammate, Kevin Porter Jr. like left the arena or something. I don't think he like left, but it was not good. It was a very bad situation. And like, you could even go back further than that. Like the Pistons were a team that like had money and they had a chance. Like they had a young talent, clearly very talented offensive player, and they let him go to the Rockets for not a massive payday, like decent payday, but like, so that may tell you something. So I think if you're a young team or a team that is not sure you're going to be, a contender, maybe you didn't want to go after Christian Wood because you're like, I don't know what he's going to mean to our culture. And if you're looking at contending teams, well, a lot of those teams don't need starting centers because they already have someone pretty good. So in that sense, you could look at the Mavs and be like, yeah, they kind of fit in that sweet spot where they had a glaring hole in the middle and they, needed to, or they had an asset to give up, and they're a contender. So I get it. Still feels a little light, but in terms of the usage thing, I guess that depends a little bit on Christian Wood and how he is going to accept his role there, because anyone alongside Luka Doncic is not going to be like the center of attention. I don't know.
Contract year.
It is a contract year. He hasn't made that much money. This contract was what? He got paid about $40 million on this deal total.
It's around there. Yeah.
Yeah. Before that, he never made any money to speak of. So, yeah, I mean, and look, God knows we've talked about the 2023 free agent class. It's not like there's going to be a lot of big names on the market. I mean, there's a chance Christian Wood, if he has himself a really nice season, is going to get really well paid. So you think this may have an effect on Brunson? Well,
I'll say this as well. Christian Wood is now continuous soup. The Mavs were able to swap out salary that was going nowhere for something that they could extend. But what's interesting about that too is if they plan on keeping him, and why wouldn't they, then theoretically that's also going to be more in luxury taxes, not this upcoming season, but the one after, when you're paying Luka and you're paying Christian Wood, who's eligible to be extended, I guess 6 months or so from the date of the trade for 120% of his salary, which I think actually he could do. He could, if he's having like a good enough season where he's earning probably like $15-16 million, 17 might be a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I think 17 is the most he could earn with that 120%. If he's having a good season, I'd be surprised if he extended for that amount. Not shocked. I'd be surprised.
The only thing is you have to think about how many teams have cap space for the 2023-24 season. Oh. I think it might actually be less, but we'll see how that shakes out soon. Yeah. And so if it's fewer than what you got now and you're doing well and you like what's going on, then maybe you just kind of accept the offer, and you're probably not going anywhere unless it's for a legitimate star, which again could happen, but it seems like they need him more than they would need someone like Brunson, where even though Brunson's the better player, they can find a way to make Brunson more expendable than they would Christian Wood, because the center market isn't great. They probably just determined we can't get a center for the tax mid-level exception, which is like $6 million.
Yeah,
we can't sign and trade for one because it will hard cap us, and we're going to be well above that $155 million. So it doesn't make sense for us to do that. So yeah, let's give our 26th pick. We don't know how to draft well in the last 20 years outside of the year 2018. So might as well just say, screw it. I get why they did it. It's just, I think it'll have some pretty interesting ramifications as well.
That is a good transition to Jalen Brunson. So Jalen Brunson went on a podcast. What was it? 2 days ago? Like a couple days, something like that. And I'll be honest, I did not listen to the pod. I know what was said. So I'm going to turn it over to you because you, I think, actually listened to it. But in essence, he sounded like a guy who was in talking about the Dallas Mavericks was talking about a team that he is still very much in on. Is that a fair representation?
See, I understand that I'm coming from a position where I would like Jalen Brunson on the Knicks. So in my mind, it's like, what can I look for and parse out? I tried everything to take a different approach from that and just look at it as objectively as possible.
Okay.
I know a lot of people were, quote, retweeting it or replying or in the comments being like, oh, Jalen Brunson, he's saying we, and he's thinking about the future. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, what is he supposed to say?
Yeah.
If he said they, everyone would be going, oh my God, what does he mean they? He's a Maverick. Right this moment, he's still under contract as a Maverick. And I just think that it would create far more controversy. Like he could speak generally. He could say, you have to do this, but then even still, I think that would just create a lot of questions.
Can I throw something at you?
Sure.
There have been, I feel like murmurings now with free agency 2 weeks away that perhaps the Dallas Mavericks are not ready to completely open up the checkbook for Jalen Brunson. Could this be we talked about the Donovan Mitchell pre-exit strategy, Woj, Quinn Snyder leak, whatever it is. I'm unsettled or unsullied. I don't know what the hell he said. Could this be a little bit of that sort of gamesmanship? Like, thinking ahead to the press conference in which he may be wearing a different uniform, wearing a different hat, I guess, as it were. Talking about like, yeah, I'll be honest, I would have loved to be back in Dallas. They didn't value me to the point that team X did, Yeah.
And there's only so much he can say. There's only so much anyone can say. Not to shift gears too much, but
shift.
The fact that there's been so much silence from the Knicks about almost everything, I really think is killing people. Because it gets to this point where
I love it.
You know how so a tactic to use in negotiations that works is silence. You have to let silence linger. And the thing is, like, if I want to talk about a negotiation tactic of I want more money, if I say, hey, I want X amount, and then you say nothing and you're interviewing me, you're potentially hiring me, and there's just kind of like quiet. Nothing really going on. I might feel encouraged to start speaking because the silence feels awkward. And maybe I did something. Maybe I shouldn't be speaking. And I think that what we do is we take words and weigh them so heavily that it creates scenarios where we just kind of not delude, but we wrap ourselves into it, right? Like what we got from this Brunson situation, all we have is Mark Cuban saying, well, we can offer him the most money. We can give him the most years. We want to keep him. We think he wants to stay here. And all of a sudden, boom, but what are the Knicks supposed to say? They can't say anything.
No,
because he's a member of the Mavericks. That would be considered tampering. They wouldn't say anything. They've been so quiet. And I understand. I get we have different viewpoints, especially on Randle and how he's viewed. And maybe we could talk about that afterwards. But it almost feels like from what I've seen, a lot of Knicks fans, because they've heard nothing, say, oh, well, this must mean he's not going anywhere. So we're accepting that he's not going to be, that he's going to be here. We're resigned to that fact. And that's the case. And honestly, we don't have the information to dictate one way or the other that he's going to stay or he's going to go. But to circle back just to Brunson, there were two things that stood out to me. Number one was he had this conversation, or it wasn't a conversation, so to speak, but it was Duncan Robinson asking him about how you get back to this point. And Brunson said, yeah, just ego. You got to put it aside. We have to work together, really focus on being a team and together. And it's funny because I was listening to this after you and Mike spoke, and there's a whole Kristaps Porzingis mindset of how maybe they didn't love KP. And I'm thinking about it, and it's like, well, then you're talking about ego, and the Mavs just brought in Christian Wood, who has never really demonstrated the ability to be a team first, me second player. I'm not saying that it was connected. It was just a funny coincidence to hear that. It reminded me as well of like, this is Tom Thibodeau's philosophy. This is what he stands for. And I know that his father, Rick Brunson, stands for this. And I know that he and Tom Thibodeau have similar core values because they will have now worked in 3 different locations together.
Could we take it one step further?
Yeah.
And I say this as again, everybody knows, foremost Luka fan, outside of that. I shouldn't say I'm a fan of his. I love his game. I think very highly of him as a player and what he's going to be someday. Is it not? Could it not be considered a little egotistical / selfish to repeatedly come into camp out of shape?
I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
As opposed to a Jalen Brunson who, I mean, I don't have firsthand knowledge of his work ethic, but it would sure seem like he's put in the work as much as one can put in the work over the years. So again, kind of 2 very different things.
That's a great segue to the second thing that I was going to say.
Sure. Which
is that Brunson talked about, because Duncan Robinson and Brunson faced off against each other in the finals, Villanova versus Michigan. Villanova won. It was the second national championship that Brunson won. And one of the things that Brunson said was, I have been underestimated at every single point in my basketball career. When I was in high school, played well, college, played well, NBA, play well. Every single time it's, Jalen's a great player, but.
Yeah.
And when you said chip on his shoulder, that's what came to my mind as well. And it goes back to the whole thing. We don't know these people. But what I can tell you from listening to Jalen Brunson, there is a big part of him just from coming across in that interview, and I'm really trying not to read too much into it, but it seems like there is a part of him that is pretty significant that wants validation, who has been told for so long, you're not anything special.
His dad told us this in that interview from whatever it was a month ago.
And it just screams to me where if there is a place where if you wanted to feel special, feel validated, feel like you're at home, like you're comfortable, it's New York. The question, of course, is leaving Dallas worth it for Brunson? And we just don't know the answer for that. It's unanswerable for us. But it just was fascinating to me that you're talking, like he's talking about ego and teamwork and everyone coming together and being a workhorse and living and dying in the gym. And then people don't believe in me.
So this is, we've talked for years and over the last several weeks about the meaning of winning and what winning does for an organization. And for years, the notion of a very good player coming to the Knicks was immediately met. The first criticism amongst probably several criticisms, the first criticism is usually, well, why would you want to go to the Knicks and lose? I know they did not have a good year last year, although as much as we shat on it, as you yourself have brought up time and time again over the last several weeks, they still won 37 games. And the year before that, and this is what I'm really getting to, is I think that dispelled the notion that, the Knicks are just never going to be an organization that can win, because what did Tom Thibodeau do? He took a team that wasn't expected to win very much, and he won games with them because he got them to play a certain way. Now, we don't have to get into what went wrong this year. Things went wrong and the ship went sideways and then probably backwards for a bit. But I think Jalen Brunson, I'll streamline this. This is not about Jalen Brunson being like, oh, I want to go take the money and be in the New York spotlight. I think he believes that if he comes here, he can help turn the thing around to where it was a year ago and maybe even surpass that. And I think that is where, we talked a week ago about the meaning of Rick Brunson coming here. Like, it's not that he would be coming here to play for his dad. but I'm sure he knows what type of coach his dad is. I'm sure he knows how demanding his dad is. And I'm sure he knows what it means to play for a Tom Thibodeau team. The one part against what I'm saying is the Randle piece of it, and the fact that Randle was not held accountable last year. And I wonder what Jalen Brunson thinks of that. But again, that's not something we could know.
True. I do want to talk about this the mailbag episode.
Okay.
So I was listening to it. A couple of things came to mind. The first one, I have to be a stickler about this.
Please. Stickle. Is stickle a verb?
Yeah, sure.
Stickle. Stickle away.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You and Chris had discussed the Fisher report where Randle and Fournier, no one really wants them.
It was implied.
Well, but the thing I struggled with was it didn't seem implied because the whole nature of their value was intertwined with clearing cap space for Brunson, which is different than they don't have value for matching salary.
So what you're saying is there's a difference between we want to use our cap space on Julius Randle / Evan Fournier versus we will, just to use the Trailblazers as an example, we will take on Evan Fournier or Julius Randle. I understand the money doesn't work exactly with Randle for Eric Bledsoe. That's your point.
Yes. It's more about the moving pieces because these teams that have cap space, they have every right to try to prioritize it because that's their leverage. But, it's like, okay, you want to dump the money? That's fine. We'll just ask you for more of it because there are opportunity costs that we're not getting out of this. And I thought that I wanted to make it clear because
that's fair.
There is value there. It's just a matter of what the returning value is. It's just not going to be, hey, we dumped cap space as we've talked about. Hopefully that's not the case anyway, because there are ways to go about getting a player like Brunson.
We know they're not. Right. We know that the Knicks are not going to dump cap space and open up $25 million within the first 24 hours of free agency or whatever it is. Yeah. It's not going to happen. I have not gotten the sense. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but just while I'm thinking of it, I have not gotten the sense that the Knicks are of the mindset of we have to get Julius Randle off the team. My assumption is that they're probably exploring deals involving every player on the roster outside of RJ Barrett. But I still don't think they want to get rid of Randle just to get rid of him.
Right. I understand. But at the same time, if Randle doesn't want to be here, and if the Knicks also want to prioritize Obi Toppin, then something has to give, right?
Well, you're preaching to the choir there.
I know I am.
I'm telling you what my assumption is, which could be fucking dead wrong.
Sure. I guess the other question I have is, what is it that we say is the best ability?
Availability.
Right. I just trying to figure out what about Brogdon it is that feels like a more of a value play, but Randle isn't. Because I went back and I looked and I was genuinely curious. And Brogdon has played in, out of 231 possible games the last 3 years with the Pacers, he played in 150 of them. That's 65%.
60%. There you go. Okay.
Randle, on the other hand, has appeared in 207 of 220 possible games. That's 94%.
My Brogdon theory is I could simplify it in a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe two sentences, 2.5 sentences. The Knicks don't feel like this. They have a starting point guard for next year on this team currently, and they need to get one. And they will go down their list of preferred options if they can't get the ones that are more preferable, they will settle on the best one on their list. And I think Brogdon is higher on their list. I have no idea what the Knicks think of Malcolm Brogdon. I really don't. I think probably a lot of the noise you're hearing is generated by play. It's not being generated by the Knicks. I can tell you that.
It's not.
We're both in agreement about that. But let me ask you, do you think the Knicks feel like they have their starting point guard of next year's team on the roster right now?
Well, as I've said, I don't, just because I don't think they see IQ in that role this year.
Okay. So we agree on that.
100%.
Their preferred options, I think, right now, I have it personally ranked as one, Jaden Ivey. They'd love to trade up for Jaden Ivey. And if they trade up for Jaden Ivey, they're going to give the keys to him and say, here, go learn. Number 2 would be Jalen Brunson. And maybe they feel like they could give Ivy and Brunson. I don't know. I have no idea. But would you agree that if they don't get Ivy at the very least, Brunson is the next option?
I would say that is the order, and that is my personal order as well.
Great. Me too. So we're in agreement there.
Mm-hmm.
If they cannot get Brunson, do you have anyone else in mind where you're like, I think the Knicks would look in that direction before they looked at Brogdon?
So it's less about, is there another player? Because there could be one out there that becomes available. It's more, is Brogdon's value going to be at a point where the Knicks are paying and treating him like he's an asset? Because
well, so that's,
to me, he's not. He's turning 30 years old. There's 3 years and $66 or so million left. He can't stay healthy. He had one fantastic season in Milwaukee that helped get him paid, where he went 50, 40, 90. He has not been that player. In that season, he was also very much a third option catch and shoot spot up guy. And now he's had a lot more responsibility. And my hope / thought process here is that if the Knicks do want Brogdon because they don't get Ivy or they don't get Brunson, it's because they view him not as someone they're willing to pay a decent amount for in terms of assets. It's, we know, Indiana, that you want to focus on Tyrese Halliburton, and you have every effort
100%.
to move Brogdon, and you just signed him to this contract, and maybe you don't really want him on that contract because he can't play, and you want to turn him into something else. That's where I think it's more the Brogdon interest. We can get him, and maybe it's an asset play, but at the same time, it's just, we're not going to spend a lot to get him. We might even get something in return for taking him on.
I'm in like 85% of agreement with you in terms of where the Pacers are at and in terms of where the Knicks are at. Where I'm slightly in disagreement is so like we've heard it's been reported, I think another Fisher report probably, or maybe it's, I forget where, there's so many reports flying around. I forget, but somewhere on the interwebs from a source that is not like at, Leon Rose fan 1, 2, 3, whatever. It was like the Pacers are seeking, maybe on Hoops Hype I saw this, I don't know. The Pacers are seeking like good stuff for Malcolm Brogdon. That to me says that no one wants to give them anything good for Malcolm Brogdon. So I am thus far in agreement with you. Where I diverge a bit is I do not think that they accept the fact that he is a negative contract. So in a sense, I think they probably view him in a slightly better light than the Knicks view Julius Randle, in that they feel like, okay, we can go into this year with Malcolm Brogdon on our team with the full understanding that he is not in our long-term plans. Yes, you run the risk he could get injured in the first quarter of the first game, but I would bet that they are willing to run the risk that if they don't get a deal that they like enough, they'll just start the season with him and then hope that he increases his value a little bit, and then a deal comes along as the season goes on. What is the value they'd be willing to accept? I don't think they're going to give him away for nothing. I'll say that. I think they're going to want something that they feel like. And by the way, I tossed Fournier's name out there this week in a newsletter. I think something could be built around that, but I bet you the Pacers would look at Fournier and be like, yeah, Brogdon might not be great money, but Fournier might be slightly worse money. So I think they'd want a little sweetener.
See, but the reason I disagree is, well, for one, I don't think they'd still do it because as long as Hield is on the roster and Duarte, I don't think they need Fournier.
That's a fair point.
But with Fournier, it's like, I don't want to undersell him because we are talking about someone who obliterated the Knicks 3-point shooting record in a single season. And look, I'm not saying that's the greatest record of all time.
It's a valid record. But he's a maddening player.
He is a maddening player, but he is also a player who is healthy enough when, if you get him on the right night, you're getting something that is productive and you're getting some value there.
So wait, can I switch gears? let's say it's Noel and Burks or Kemba and Burks, right? Mm-hmm. But Burks in one of the two salaries that we think the Knicks want to get rid of. Does that change your mind at all?
It's closer. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. But again, it depends on Ivy. It depends on.
It depends Brunson. It depends on a lot of things. Yeah.
It's better, but it's not there. I just don't see him as positive value, but I understand why the Pacers would. It's like a used car salesman. You want to get the car off the lot. You get the person to the lot. If they're there, you hold their attention. You find a way to make it work.
So the part of the curiosity of figuring this out is like is trying to answer the question. Well, what would the Knicks do? And again, you kind of brushed it off, and I get that. There's always stuff that becomes available, right? Kemba Walker became available, right? I'm looking through the league. I really do wonder what they would do if the Pacers were like, let's say the Pacers were being sticklers and like, yeah, we want something really good. And Leon Rose was like, no, you're not getting it. Okay. I just wonder what they would do. And I wonder who would blink first. And I hope the Knicks would not blink first.
I mean, again, another option, which I understand is maybe not their preference, but they could just start Emmanuel quickly. I know we both are. I know. I'm just saying. Sure. I'm just saying that if they're not willing to pay a premium for someone like Brogdon to miss 20 games or so a year, they could just
or 60
roll with,
games.
Yeah. They could just roll with IQ starting. They could still keep Derrick Rose, and they could have Deuce filling in for Rose when he's injured. I don't think it's their preference by any means. I think it's not like the bottom of their list at all, but it's something to keep in mind where they don't want to, like, yes, they do need that, salary filler if they're going to keep trying to make trades that way, but that's not even their real philosophy. I mean, that is, I don't want to say that's not their philosophy. It's their philosophy. I think at a certain point, they don't want to nuke the entire team in order to just have that mindset.
I completely agree. And let me just be very clear for anybody wondering what my opinion on this is. If they did blink and they gave up a real thing for Brogdon, I would not like it. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I would hate it, because I do think like we're being probably a little harsh on a player who, when healthy, again, massive blinking, flashing red lights, when healthy, is a productive player in his own right. Does it mean he's the player the Knicks should want right now? Absolutely not. And I hope they are not looking in his direction.
I'd agree. I do. Before we go on to the main course, I do have something that I wanted to run by you.
Please.
It was a thought that kind of like popped into my head, and it's kind of marinated in there for a while, and I can't quite shake it loose.
Teriyaki marinade? Love teriyaki marinade.
Oh, it's great. Nice sweetness to it. Yeah. So I've been trying to think, because yes, there are thoughts of where's Julius Randle going to go? No one wants Julius Randle.
Do you have the Julius Randle team?
I hope so. I don't know for certain, but I think I can make a compelling case for why this would actually work.
Can I get 3 guesses?
Sure. I'll give you 3 guesses.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to spend too long on this. I'm literally just looking down the list of team. Brooklyn.
No.
The Clippers.
No.
I have one more guess.
Make it count.
I should know you well enough to be able to know the team that's going to come out of your mouth right now. But I feel like all right, hold on. Give me two more. I'm almost through my list of teams. Do you have a 3-team deal in mind?
It could turn into a 3-team deal. I do have that thought process, but it could still be 2. My preference would have it be 3. I just want to point out, it's not, because you can make it before the draft, you can make it after the draft. You could also just avoid the draft entirely, but the
Atlanta.
Preference, what?
Atlanta.
It's not Atlanta.
Who is it? Or do you want to set it up?
I'll say up front, I think it could be the Spurs.
Wow.
Here's why.
Whoa.
Here's what actually set it off for me. So
I can't wait to hear this.
I'm not saying this will happen. I have no knowledge that this will happen, but I actually have talked myself into why it could happen and why it could work for both teams.
Talk yourself. Come on.
No. I saw a report that the Spurs were interested in drafting a 5 at the 9th pick overall.
Okay. I think I saw the same report.
The prevailing thought is it's Jalen Duren. It could be Mark Williams, though, even though that's a little bit higher up. And there's also the fact that the Spurs have 9, 20, and 25. So they basically, another report was saying they want to move off of 25 for a future pick because they have too many picks. And they're trying to consolidate in some way by kicking it down the line. Drafting a 5 then gets to the thought process of, okay, well, what's the whole deal with Jakob Poeltl? And Poeltl is someone who then could be on the block because of the fact that there was another report. This is all just reported and, reportedly, potentially, whatever, but let's just play along with it. Where the Spurs don't really want to pay Jakob Poeltl. He's on an expiring contract entering this upcoming year for like a little under $10 million.
Which we should point out makes him someone who, unless I would be surprised if you disagree with this, I think he's very unlikely to resign because I think Jakob Poeltl is getting more than $11.5 million on the open market.
I would agree.
So he is going to go into unrestricted free agency.
And I actually went and did some research because I was curious. And there was an article that had interviewed Jakob Poeltl at some point. And the way that he described it was very much, this is a business. It could be someone other than the Spurs.
I read that as well. Yeah.
And to me, it was thinking, I just don't think the Spurs want to keep Jakob Poeltl long-term. So where would he go? What would he do? Well, the thing is, the reason why, if he goes to the Knicks, why I don't know if it would be announced on draft night, but I figured I should just say this now because in the event that it happens, then could have said it. And that would have been cool. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter because it's all leading up to it. So it's a win-win for me. But if Jakob Poeltl if it were announced on draft night, then it essentially puts the Knicks in a weakened position with Mitch because then everyone knows, they're getting rid of Mitchell Robinson. Now, it doesn't mean that the Knicks can't sign and trade him because they could. It's just their position is a little bit weakened. But we'll see.
Can I promise I won't spend a long time on this. I just need to talk out for myself why their position. It should be obvious, right? It's like, well, if they get a center, then everybody knows that they don't want Mitch. What if they just don't want Mitch and they don't care who knows it?
It's possible. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, if another team still wants Mitchell Robinson and they have to sign and trade for him, then they still do need to work with the Knicks. It's just, Mitch basically going to sign with another team for the mid-level exception or out of cap space? And that's that. Or if he goes to a place like Detroit, as we've talked about, and they have cap space and they sign and trade him and pay a second round pick to get a traded player exception. Like that's something else they could do. It's still an important move for them to make.
100%. I'm almost wondering if at this point the Knicks have an offer on the table for Mitchell Robinson that is low and that Mitch and his representation are like, F you, we're going to go find money elsewhere. And if the Knicks response to that is like, okay, here's how we're going to show you how serious we are about the fact that we're not going above the number that's on the table right now, and then execute this trade. I didn't want to take a step off course.
But it's an important piece of it. So I agree. But the thing about Poeltl is he's a lot like Mitch, but he does a lot of things better. He's not,
oh my goodness, he's so
not
good.
Perfect, but he is a better defensive player. He's a smarter player. He is someone
high floor player.
He finishes. He screens so well. He rebounds really well. He's a great shot blocker. He's a worse roller than Mitch is, but he still does it at an okay amount. But like, if you think about a Walt Perrin 5 on the defensive end and having the hands to finish and grab boards, which, as we talked about, when the Mitchell Robinson cap or no cap, those are some of the most important pieces. He is a perfect player. And I would like to think that in a Tom Thibodeau system that you can get even more, not to say Pop is any slouch. He's not. He's pretty good. But that based on the way Tibbs has worked with bigs, especially ones who are decent passers. I mean, Joakim Noah was an incredible passer. Jakob Poeltl is not nearly that level, but he can do a little bit more. He also stretches the floor a tiny bit in the sense of he might take some mid-range jumpers. You're not going to expect to see him behind the 3-point line, but he is someone where you basically are getting your anchor. and you feel very comfortable exceeding the salary cap to pay him, because my whole philosophy, and I hope this is proven correct, is that it's not that the Knicks don't want to pay a center. It's that they maybe just don't want to pay Mitchell Robinson the money he's looking for.
Can I just say, to be extremely clear, that is exactly what I think is the case right now.
Especially if you're going over the salary cap, because you're already there. There's no reason not to. But I digress a bit to go back to kind of the framework in this whole thing. So why the Knicks do it? I mean, obviously, if Julius Randle does not want to be a Knick, if the Knicks feel that it's better to move on to Obi Toppin, that is a perfect reason. You clear the space for Obi, because we know they're not going to play together. I was looking at Julius in terms of the amount of minutes that he's played at the center position the last 3 years. And obviously, one of them predates Tibbs, but like the fact that it's like 95% power forward, 5% center, 93% power forward.
It hasn't happened. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think Obi is even going to be that player as well to flank him. So as we've said, it's 48 minutes minus Julius Randle equals Obi Toppin. I don't think you can go into next season. I don't want to go into next season with that. I know you don't. I know a lot of people don't.
You know I don't.
I do. I do indeed.
But so.
So you know about the fact that Pirtle is a Mitch replacement. You can sign and trade Mitchell Robinson depending, as long as he doesn't sign for the mid-level exception and just signs for it, and you can't really do a sign and trade for that. The fact that you could, like other salary that might have to come in. I was thinking a third team that could come into to make the math and everything work out is you could do the Blazers. You could have them sending Bledsoe to the Knicks in some capacity. And then they take on Josh Richardson and Romeo Langford, something along those lines where the math works.
So wait, hold on. So is it just about the math, or are you now talking about sending Randle somewhere else?
No, I'm just the math. Randle's, I'll say why I think.
Yeah, this is the part that has me hanging on a thread here, but
that's fine. I've beaten around the bush too much.
No, it's fine. I just look, I'll be very clear about it. I don't think the Spurs want him.
Well, here's the thing. They need a 4 desperately. They Doug McDermott playing the 4 the entire season. He's not someone who can really handle it.
Keldon Johnson played some 4, didn't he?
But not. He was really much more of a 2-3.
I think he's more of a. I don't know. I think he's a 3. I agree with you that you probably do not want Keldon Johnson as your 4 moving forward. I'll agree with that.
Right. So the thing about San Antonio, the benefit that they have is they can rehab Julius Randle's value, and it won't really matter one way or the other. Because if you look at the West, if we could just play the if game, but let's do it. If the Lakers aren't one of, if not the biggest disappointments in NBA history, they're ahead of the Spurs. If Damian Lillard is not injured and held out for the season as the Blazers tank, they're ahead of the Spurs. The
Spurs tried to tank.
Right. They tried to tank, and they tanked their way into the 10th seed. They couldn't get out of their own way. They are a team that desperately does not want to be better. Here's the thing about Julius, right? If Julius,
he's the ultimate tank.
Arguably. It's a win-win situation. Either he is exactly what they need in terms of losing games, or they start to actually do well and he can play there and he looks good and they start winning games, and then they can do the exact thing that the Knicks don't have the patience for because they have Obi. Similar to like the Pacers and Halliburton and Brogdon. They can wait a little bit. They can rehab his value, and it's probably not going to affect their standings really at all. And I'm sure some people are thinking, well, stretching the floor, that's a disaster, right? You got DeJounte Murray, you got Julius Randle. Here's the thing. You can play Julius Randle at the 5, something Tibbs does not do, something that he did a great job of in New Orleans. And you can have Murray at the 1, Randle at the 5, and then 3 floor spacers like Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and Doug McDermott. That looks pretty good. You can work with that. And you don't even have to win games. It's just like it opens options up. That's the thing. You have Zach Collins, who also is a lower budget 5 who can play ahead of Duren or Williams or whoever until he probably gets hurt, in which case, cool. We're going to start a rookie center. That doesn't usually work out very well for teams that want to be good. So it happens there. They don't have to pay Pirtle, as I was mentioning. I see it as an opportunity for them to buy low on a player who, let's face it, even if Julius Randle is in the middle of last season, the season before, isn't essentially Pirtle and let's say the 25th pick. After we just saw Christian Wood go for the 26th pick, isn't that worth taking a flyer on a guy to maybe be a top 40 player on a top 40 contract?
I'm gonna tell you why I don't think this is nuts, and I'm gonna tell you why I still don't think it happens. This is not nuts because if you're wondering about whether the Spurs would do something like this, they kind of already did. I understand the circumstances were very different in terms of the trade, but if you're looking at a player whose value, who had shown real ability at the NBA level and whose value was in the toilet, look no further than DeMar DeRozan. And the Spurs took him on and they leaned into his strengths and they developed his game. And that dude went and essentially rehabilitated his, I don't want to say rehabilitated his career because he was still like putting up numbers and stuff in Toronto, but like nobody thought anything of DeMar DeRozan when he went to San Antonio. And then I thought they did a wonderful job turning him into like a point power forward essentially. So, and also the other thing why it's not crazy is the Spurs have never obviously cared about like where the shots that you're supposed to take versus the shots you're not supposed to take. They brush all that to the side. The reason why I don't think it's going to happen is I still, well, actually, I don't even know if I believe this. I was going to say they could probably get just a much cleaner future asset for Pirtle right now if they wanted to. But then again, like,
what's the ceiling for Pirtle? I don't mean that disrespect. No, I really like him.
Yeah, I as I'm saying the words, I don't know if I believe them because again, I'll refer back to and again. Jakob Poeltl is a player I think most winning teams would want more than they would want Christian Wood. Even though Christian Wood could do things that Jakob Poeltl cannot dream of doing, they talk about polar opposite types of players. Like, but Christian Wood just got the 26th pick in the draft. So like, what is the great ass? Who's giving up the amazing thing for Jakob Poeltl?
It's maybe the Hornets taking it. Like, are they doing Plumlee and 15 for Poeltl?
That's the deal, right?
Like, but it's a lot. And maybe the Hornets would rather, because here's the thing. We talked about the Hornets and their pay issues. They have to pay PJ Washington. Yeah. They're still dealing with Gordon Hayward. They're going to have to worry about Miles Bridges. They're going to have to deal with Lonzo Ball. Like, they might just say, we don't want to spend big money on a center who needs to get paid. And I would understand it. I mean, they should just pay more and MJ should decide to not be so thrifty, but that's a different conversation. I guess it's the other thought process of even if you take out 25 and at a certain point for the Knicks, you do want this to be, you don't want to sell so low that it's like, why are we even doing this? Even though you do have Obi knocking on the door. But even if you took out, say, the 25th pick or the 20th pick, whatever, and you had the Bledsoe factor going there and the Blazers did that Milwaukee 2025 or the Milwaukee 2025 first. If you're the Spurs, couldn't you make an argument that Langford, who's really just $5 million of expiring salary, that played 4 games for the Spurs and it was at the end of the season?
I have a little upside left, but
there's no upside. No, I don't want to be cruel.
You're out on Romeo Langford.
No, the Spurs weren't even in. If they wanted to, they were trying to tank and they didn't even play Romeo Langford. So that kind of tells you something. But if you're basically the Spurs and you're saying Poeltl and Josh Richardson or Poeltl and McDermott, take your pick for Randle, that, like, to me, especially because they don't have to care about cap space because they're going to be below for the next few years. Their most expensive salary right now is DeJounte Murray, and he's making like $17 million a year.
Yeah,
they're not a free agent destination. And at the point where they have to pay Murray again and Keldon Johnson, God, I keep saying Kendall. It's Keldon Johnson. I love it
that you keep doing this.
They pay the two of them. They pay Randle. By the time their expenses are large enough, it's 2025 when the salary cap spikes up because of the new TV deal. There's no financial peril from it at all. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but San Antonio is an hour's flight away from Dallas. You want to talk about a place where Randle can be comfortable? It's Texas. So I understand why there might be doubts and why there is no perfect location for Julius Randle. But I feel like this is the one place, based on the circumstances and where we're lining it up, where there aren't so many reasons for why this team would not do it. there are a lot of reasons for teams for why they wouldn't do it, why they shouldn't do it, why they can't do it. To me, this is basically more of like shrug. I could see it. It's maybe not the best option. It's maybe not something that is worthwhile for both parties, but at the same time, it very easily could be because they both have players that they seem to want to move off of. If it's worth the flyer, then why not?
My goodness, would I like this deal for the Knicks?
Again, even if you're, and I want to not treat Randle like garbage because he's not garbage. He is someone whose value is low.
Yeah, but like, the Knicks
you're telling me it's Pirtle, Bledsoe, and a first round pick from Milwaukee by way of Portland, or Portland by way of Milwaukee, like that's why you re-signed Randle. It's not.
Wait, how are we getting the? How are we getting the?
So I'll take a step back. It's
the Blazers pick. It's the Milwaukee pick that the Blazers own.
Right. So it's Randle to the Spurs.
Yeah.
It's Langford or and McDermott or Richardson to the Blazers. And then Bledsoe and the Milwaukee 2025 pick that the Portland Blazers so they own and Pirtle to the Knicks.
So they would have to think that Josh Richardson or Doug McDermott will help them win basketball games.
Which, when you look at their supporting cast and what they might need,
I mean, shit, we could get Alec Burks to Portland for at that rate.
In what sense?
Bledsoe's making 18, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying, but the math would probably actually get thrown off the other way because it's too much money going out.
Too much money going
out from the Knicks' perspective if you throw Burks in there as well.
Who cares about the money going out from the Knicks' perspective?
Well, but I don't want to treat Burks as a throw in either. Like that's the thing. If you are using Randle to get a starting center, a weak first round pick, and mass salary that's not going to play, like to me, that's a step in the right direction. Is it the most ideal? It is not. But I don't think that we're going to get to a point where we can say, let's wait enough to strike and get the thing that we want. If we as fans, and actually not everyone wants him gone, and I respect that point of view. I just disagree with it. But if there is the philosophy of he needs to go so we can have Obi and you can turn Randle into a better player than Mitchell Robinson, you can use Mitch in a sign and trade to get more assets, and you take on Bledsoe's crap money and you get a first round pick out of it. Like, to me, that just sounds like a very ideal scenario while you're also doing other things on the side.
I love this. And to anyone out there who thinks something that I've said before, which is that like, you don't want to sell low in a vacuum. You don't want to sell low. You never want to sell low when there's no reason to sell low. There's a reason to sell lower than you might want to on Randle right now, and his name is Obi Toppin, and I don't know how you get around that. And like, even if, because like, I don't know, is there a chance the Knicks just think Obi Toppin is just like a guy? Yeah, maybe. And maybe they don't think it is the end of, like, they have to open up a certain amount of time for him, as much as we as Knicks fans would love nothing more than that. It's still, if you are looking to turn the page off of what was a clearly unpalatable year last year, that's the part of it that I don't know how you move forward with both of these players on the roster. And if the alternative to trading Randle is trading Obi Toppin, then I hope you're not trading him just to move on from him. Like, and again, that's the other part of the conversation is like, who's giving up real value for Obi? I don't know the answer to that question either.
Yes. And another thought that kind of just dawned on me, if you did do this on draft night, instead of the 2025 first, do you work out where you trade from 11 to 7?
To 7.
And then do you go into, we're better positioned for Ivy? Because now you're not doing the Julius Randle and 11 for Eric Bledsoe and 7, which I have absolutely loathed and will continue to loathe.
Can we talk about that for a sec?
Yes.
There's a notion that the Knicks are going to get Julius to the Blazers and get 7 that way. It's not going to happen. We should dispel that notion right here. It's not going to happen. It's
a clunky fit. It's clumsy. And it's also just like we like, as you were just saying, you want to get good value for him. To me, that's just not good value, period. That is.
I don't know if I agree
only
with
good
that.
value if it makes your life easier to get Jaden Ivey. That is the exception that I have maintained, and I will add that back again.
I think that
if you can do it, then that's the price of doing business. But I don't think it's going to happen anyway, because I think there are better, easier moves for the Blazers to make that aren't quite. I mean, it's not taxing. I see why they should do it. I just think there are players that they prioritize not named Julius Randle.
I completely agree with that. Okay.